Hey guys, I'm Yoshi on the Go. It's October 2023 and I just installed a 2TB SSD in this bad boy right here, my Xbox One X. So let's talk about that right now. Alright, so I just wanted to give some quick specs in case that's all you're looking for. After installing this SSD, Xbox boot up became 2 times faster. Loading an Xbox One game on average was about 4 times faster, and loading an Xbox 360 game was about 3 times faster. Alright, so here we are on my Xbox dashboard. Let's go up and check out settings, down to system and storage devices. And as you can see here, we've got 57 gigabytes free out of 1.6 terabytes. And I know that's not quite 2 terabytes, but no matter how you format your console, the Xbox always takes a couple hundred gigabytes for itself for performance and for OS updates and things like that. 2 terabytes, and it's pretty dang good. But should you do that? Alright, so if you want more hard drive space on your Xbox, there are 4 ways to do that. Number 1 is just an external USB drive, whether that's a hard disk drive or an SSD. There are benefits to having both in my tests. Pros of an external drive are 1, it's going to be the cheapest option. 2, you just plug it in, no tools are required, it just works. However, the boot up time will be the same because that's still all on the internal hard drive. That's the easiest option. You just buy a hard drive, you plug it in, and it works. All right. This next option and all the options after this require you getting into the console itself. So you'd need some extra tools. Like I've got this $10 toolkit from Amazon that has Torque X screws and some spudgeons and some other little things to help you get into electronics. You're also going to need like a hard drive cloner or a hard drive SATA connection of some kind. So option number 2 is just an SSD swap of the same size. This is the next easiest option because you don't really need to do anything tricky on the software side of things. It does require you opening your Xbox, putting it in a hard drive cloner, and then clicking the button on the hard drive cloner, and then that's it. That's all you have to do, and wait for everything to transfer over. This might be best doing it overnight. I actually did this initially because I thought, oh, it'll just transfer all my stuff over to the 2 terabyte and work perfectly, and it did, except for it treated that 2 terabyte as a 1 terabyte. So that option didn't work for me because I wanted the extra space. There's no point in buying a bigger hard drive when you can't have access to the storage, right? That's a little silly. But that's the next easiest option because all you have to do is take the hard drive out, you clone it, you put the new SSD back in, and that's it. So this is a little more expensive than simply buying an external hard drive, not just because the SSD is a little more expensive, but if you don't already have the tools you need, then you'll need to acquire those as well. And it can be a little scary if you're not electronically inclined to poke around inside your system. Luckily, that's all you have to do because you don't need any extra tricky programming things, you just have to clone it. The next hardest option is what I did, an SSD upgrade. I think by default, the maximum the Xbox will recognize is 2 terabytes, so that's the maximum you can do without doing some tricky software things. So that's why that's the next easiest. It is still relatively easy to install if you follow all the guides that I will have linked in the description below. And the software things that you have to do to the hard drive are minimal. All right, and the fourth and final option is to do that same thing, but get a bigger than 2 terabyte hard drive. There are some tricky software things you can do that partitions the drive to make the Xbox think that it is a native internal drive. That's not something I was really interested in, but the option is out there, so if you do want to put in an 8 terabyte SSD, you can. It will work, but it does require, again, the hardware, pulling apart the Xbox, getting the hard drive, as well as some tricky software bits that you have to install on the hard drive before putting everything back in place. All right, so let's talk about how to do that.
Low while I pop a bottle off of your chain swinging, clang clang, and it costs a lot. I'm always after Guala, yeah, and you are not bad. Deep, keep on going till you hit the spot. Whoa, I'm a big bag hunter with the bow.
Well, my experience opening up was easy enough. Despite being my first time, I just followed the iFixit guide, which is linked in the description below. Initially, though, I booted up. I thought I broke it because the screen was black, and I was just about ready to turn it off, but then, oh, boom. Before I even knew it, it was all booted up, and everything was playing great. So I'm like, what the heck? What is going on here? And turns out that you just need to find the animation file and put it in the right folder. And unfortunately, I had to do this about 7 times before I found a working boot up animation. And one of those times, actually, the disk drive would not work. It would still accept and eject disks, but nothing would happen even after a few reboots. I finally realized, however, that this guy right here, the original hard drive, had that animation file, so I plugged them both into the hard drive duplicator, which in this case can also be used as an external reader, and copied the files right over, put the hard drive back in, not this one, the SSD, and boom, everything worked great. One note though is that you need a Windows computer in order to do all these software little bits. A Macintosh won't work. So a word to the wise, however, someone in one of those comment forums recommended that you unplug all the hard drives before you do this, and I ignored that hard drive and I accidentally erased an identical 2 terabyte SSD from one of my editing raids, which is devastating. Please follow that recommendation. Unplug everything before you plug this in and do the little software things. You'll thank me later. It makes it way easier. All right, let's get right to it. The boot up time, I've got this keynote right here. The hard drive took 2 minutes basically to boot up. The SSD, 53 seconds, boom. That's screaming fast. One thing I hadn't considered though is that there is the instant on feature. And if you have the instant on feature, it's like 4 seconds. It's like literally instant on. A few reasons why I don't like doing instant on is 1, I don't get to see the awesome boot up animation. 2, it uses a lot of power. And 3, most importantly, is that I can't use it with capture cards. So if you want to use a capture card with these Xboxes and stuff, you have to have the normal shutdown boot up option enabled. So I didn't have the foresight to record the instant on with the original hard drive, but rest assured, it's going to be right around that 4-second time mark. And of course, I tested a variety of games. So on the Xbox One side, look at all these games. The internal drives, all the times basically respectable except for Borderlands 3 down here. And for some reason, Minecraft, why is Minecraft taking 3 minutes? Like, look at that. All right, so then I transferred all these games to my external hard drive, and those speeds by this darker purple, about the same, with the exception of Minecraft. I guess Minecraft and Earthfall down here got a little bit faster. Pay attention to Minecraft though, because that and Halo 4, the Xbox 360 version of Halo 4, do something very interesting, especially considering they're both first-party games. It's intriguing. Basically, the external hard drive is the same. In some instances, it's a little bit faster, like down here in Borderlands, it's a little bit faster, but in most instances, it's about the same, plus or minus a couple of seconds. Now, switching those again to the external solid-state drive, again, this is the external SSD, we do start to see those performance gains. So this is one of those circumstances, if these performance gains are good enough for you, then an external SSD is all you need to make that happen. But yeah, we can see Apex Legends right here being very consistent, as well as Fortnite. Fortnite's being pretty consistent too. And then look at Minecraft, just like we're shaving off like 30 seconds every single time. It's like a minute faster and then almost 40 seconds faster going to the external SSD, which is kind of crazy. Interestingly enough, both Control and Final Fantasy 15 booted up in 1:23. And a few other interesting points is when we look at Earthfall, there really is no difference with that game. And then kind of the same thing with World War Z. World War Z is extraordinarily consistent, but overall, with a few exceptions, there are obvious performance gains. But how does that compare to the internal SSD? Of course, my Xbox is white, so I use that as the white option. Super solid with one exception. Of course, Apex is just weirdly consistent. But then look at Fortnite. 1:40 to 33 seconds. Minecraft, 24 seconds. Control, 40 seconds. Final Fantasy 15, 48 seconds. 42 seconds. 1:09. One, of course, outliers, you can see Borderlands 3. I have no idea why this is the case, but Borderlands 3 actually takes longer than the internal hard drive, which is ludicrous. And so I tested it again 4 times in a row, and 3 minutes and 25 seconds down here in the corner. That was my fastest time testing it for this video. So I have no idea why that is, but to borrow a quote from The Dark Knight, some games just want to watch your console burn. So it's causing all sorts of mayhem, which is appropriate because it's Borderlands 3. Some obvious performance gains, but this gets even more obvious if you look at some backwards compatible games, which of course I did. So for testing this, we have 4 of my favorite Xbox 360 backwards compatible games, including Alan Wake, Halo 4, Left 4 Dead 2, and Borderlands 2. Now keep in mind, these are the Xbox 360 disc versions, too. It's not the remastered versions, it's the original 360 on the disc, but installed to the hard drive. All right, so internal speeds, pretty quick, except for some reason, 3 minutes over here on Halo 4. That seems like a bit of an outlier. I have no idea why their first-party games take so long to load. Switching them over to the external drive, again, not really much difference. In fact, all 3 of these games are a couple of seconds slower to load on an external drive, with the exception, of course, of Halo 4. I don't want to do the math there, but 3 minutes to 1.5 minutes. That's like 1.5 minutes faster. What is going on with first-party Microsoft games? External SSD, booting them all up. This is where we see marginal performance gains, especially with Halo 4, except for the fact, like, look here at Alan Wake right here. That's weirdly consistent. But I guess that game is just so well optimized, it doesn't matter how fast your hard drive is, it's just always gonna load in about a minute. But then of course, this is what's interesting with the internal SSD, they all get between 30 and 40 seconds. So with backwards compatibility, there's an obvious performance increase when you're loading the games. Looking back at here, Halo 4, and then looking back at Minecraft, we can see those look the same. Like the timing is just weirdly similar. So like, is Microsoft intentionally making their first party games slower on internal hard drives so that want to upgrade to faster Xboxes? I don't know. That's just what my data says. Those are the only first party games I tested. And again, just to recap, the boot up sequence was twice as fast. On average, loading an Xbox One game was about 4 times faster, and loading a backwards compatible 360 game was 3 times faster. But to wrap it up, sorry, this was a bit of a long one. I do not regret at all doing this. I wish I would have listened to that advice to unplug all the hard drives and avoid that mistake of erasing my data. I know as the years go on, we're 3 years into the new Xbox hardware, and more game developers are pushing to that. Considering the sheer amount of games available to play on the older hardware, it's well worth the investment, it's well worth the time. What a good boy, huh? Look at this chunky potato. So that was my journey installing an SSD in 2023. It's well worth it, and I think you should do it too.